reflect some of the decisions and some of the information that's going to be really useful in games. If not, you get goalkeepers who pee their pants every time the ball comes back to them and they're being pressed. Like I'm saying this, putting my hand up, is like when I played, I would pray the ball never came back to my left foot. I would pray that I wouldn't be pressed because I had no idea what to do. And I would just play on one every time. And even if the ball wasn't one touch playable, I would try. And it got me into trouble, right? So one is clarity in terms of like what our objectives are. 2 is programming it into our session design with realistic information. And 3 is we need to have patience, understanding, and grace. These are young players that we're trying to prepare to succeed, at the next level than they currently are. And in order to get to the next level than they currently are, they're going to make mistakes, and you have to be patient. You cannot condemn them for making an error in possession, especially if you're asking them to do it.
Yeah, it's not going to be perfect, and you can't expect it to be, and there's going to be errors. Like, I think it was recently on the TKI Instagram where it's a roll of errors from professional goalkeepers. That means they're at the pinnacle of where, maybe these youth goalkeepers want to be, or are just some of the best in the world, right? Like, there's not a lot of professional athletes in this world. So that to make it, you're one of the best. And they're making errors because they're trying things. And I think sometimes, like, that is what stops these young goalkeepers from wanting to even try to do what you're asking, because they're afraid that they're going to get hollered at. They're afraid they're going to get pulled. They're afraid of all these external things that could happen if they simply take a touch that gives it to the other team. Or, I guess worst case scenario is they get scored on off that mistake. And I think you have to supply an environment that lets them know that they're safe to do it. Mm-hmm. And it starts with giving them that freedom in training, where it really couldn't matter less if they get scored on.
Right. I think you got to figure out when and where do I want to suffer? When and where do I want to suffer? Do I want to suffer at the NWSL level because you have a goalkeeper who cannot solve pressure and freaks out every time they're pressed and makes a mistake every time, gives the ball away every time? Do you want to suffer there? Or do you want to suffer in your U12 practice?
Yeah.
In your practice. Like, and of course, even professional goalkeepers have to suffer through some mistakes in their training environments, but I would much prefer for younger players, especially, to try, explore, and make mistakes in training, and then give them some latitude in games, but also like build them up in training. It's not like we're just, be composed and solve pressure. And we're not just saying that in the game. We have built them up in their training environments, allowed them to make mistakes, reminded them, hey, I want you to explore some solutions. I'm right here with you. We're going to figure this out together. We're going to collaborate together. You are free. These next 6 rounds, I want you to explore. Check for understanding. See if they're seeing the space or not. What's their body shape look like? That's half of the problem. These goalkeepers' body shape are so oriented to the ball, they can't see the space, right? So how can you attune their attention to that space? Ask a question. Create some kind of constraint within your session design to allow that opportunity to see the space. Oh, move as touch. Okay. But yeah, I'd much prefer for that U12 training, that U16, U17, 18, whatever, U20 training, to allow them to explore, to make mistakes so that they feel more prepared when it comes to the games. And they actually are being asked to do these things and be brave.
Yeah, I hear you. And one last thing, and I could go on a soapbox here, so I'm going to try to keep myself in check. But part of the problem is exactly what you started this with, of like, we must build out, it must look this way. But one of my favorite things about soccer is that it is a free-flowing, unscripted sport. Is there things that can be scripted? 100%, yes. But there should be creativity and freedom for all players. You don't look at a 10 and say, you can only do this, right? Because you want your 10 to be a master on the ball. You want them to pick passes that are going to be dangerous in the attack. You want them to be able to help us build in our possession. And one thing that I feel is constantly happening every single time I go to recruit is that I only see goalkeepers bowl the ball out, and I only see them play short to their center back on the build out from goal kicks. And I think that directly translates to when the ball comes back to them, that short pass is all they're looking for. So much so that it's hard to even find a youth goalkeeper that has the ability to play a long ball. And I think that that's not their fault at all. I think it's a detriment to them. And it's something that's happening because of this, like, we must play this way system. But again, I'm going to jump off my soapbox. I just think it's something that we can consider when we're teaching our goalkeepers in possession, when we're teaching our back four in possession, what it can look like versus, oh, it should look like.
Yeah. Well, I actually don't even, if we go a little bit further on this in possession topic, sometimes I don't even think goalkeepers know why they're playing their center back. Like, what are the options? Why am I playing it to them? They're open and I'm going to pass the problem. That's what I think is that it's not on my foot and I'm going to pass it to someone else who's open. When we have no thought process behind, well, I'm passing it to the center back to maybe draw pressure to them. And then I'm going to change my angle of support so that I can be a better option for that center back when they get the ball to maybe play a more penetrative pass. Right. Yeah, that we'll do a whole nother podcast on that.
We will. All right, number 3. We already kind of gave you a little bit of a teaser on what number 3 was, but it's confidence. It's one of the biggest problems probably in youth sports in general, but even just like the modern goalkeeper, confidence is an issue. And why do you think that is, Jill?
Well, I think this all comes back down to session design, if I'm being honest. I think that's probably where this entire podcast is surrounded by. If we had an opportunity to change one thing, if we could change our session design to be more representative of what goalkeepers are going to see in a game, I think we can cover all 3 of these topics. I think that the problem is that when we train in a traditional goalkeeper training environment, we work on what, Tori? What is the number one thing we work on?
Shot stopping.
Yeah, technique, right?
Yeah.
Is that everyone's like, oh, technical. Got to have the technique. You got to have the technique of catching. You got to have this technique of all these things. And so then what happens is that I strike a ball at you. Hopefully it's from the floor and it's moving. It's not a volley, but I hit a ball at you. And then I say, well, you need to keep your chest forward. And I give you feedback. You need to roll your shoulders here. You need to get set. You're not balanced, blah, 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 blah. And every time I hit a ball at you, I critique you if it's not perfect. And it becomes nitpicky. And every time a goalkeeper saves a shot, they're like this. Oof, what are they going to say now? Oh, I'm going to get negative feedback. I'm going to get criticism every time. And then there's this fear that's associated with this training style because you're like, no matter what I do, I'm going to get negative feedback when it comes to this. And I'm going to have done something that I wasn't supposed to. And then the goalkeeper coach is going to give me criticism about A, and then I'm going to do A, but B falters. And then they're going to give me criticism about B. And then it just becomes this perpetuating cycle of like, I'm going to get negative feedback no matter what. And I think it doesn't create this like, oh, I can't wait to go to training. Oh, I can't wait to solve these problems. Or I'm so excited to be able to have freedom to play. Like I'm excited to, have the support of my coach who's going to give me some feedback. We're going to figure out these things together. It becomes a source of like, no matter what, I'm going to get some like criticism. And I'm not saying criticism is bad, but it just becomes very nitpicky and it creates in these goalkeepers this sense of perfectionists, which to me is like, I'm working so hard to like unravel that perfectionism in people because goalkeeping isn't perfect. Goalkeeper is about being effective. And at the end of the day, if you dive and you drop a ball and no one's there to put it in, is it a mistake? No. You picked it up, you have possession. But in training, if that information isn't there, then we're going to get nitpicked and it's going to be wrong, right? So I think if we can alter our session design and also remind players, hey, my job is to challenge you. My job is to challenge you. You're going to make mistakes today. And that's okay. I expect that. It's so much easier. You're affording an opportunity for a goalkeeper to be like, wow, I grew today. I feel so much more comfortable with blah, blah, blah. Even if they didn't have a successful outcome, I am more aware of blah, blah, blah. And to me, when you're able to have progress, and this is like something that the Harvard Business Study has done over like the last 80 years about fulfillment and happiness, is that people aren't just fulfilled. People aren't fulfilled by just the end. It's about the progress that makes people feel fulfilled and keeps them inspired and motivated. It's been like this 80-year study, just like general pop. And people are more satisfied when they feel or they sense that they're making some progress. And so for me, like, we're creating something that is transferable to the game, and people feel like, wow, I have more attention around this, or I have more understanding of those principles. Even if it didn't come off successfully in the outcome, that progress keeps them motivated to continue to maybe take some space or try again. And mistakes really aren't that like earth shattering in games, and people can remain confident even if they make a mistake in the game because they've trained that way. In training, they've learned how to adapt and adjust and, deal with the mental side of the game.
Welcome to the Keeper Institute podcast. My name is Tori Corsaro. I'm a strength and conditioning and goalkeeper coach here at the Keeper Institute and your host for today's show. The Keeper Institute is a unique goalkeeper training facility in New Jersey aimed at developing better goalkeepers and better people. On this podcast, we will be discussing all things goalkeeping, character development, and more. Podcast. I dimmed my air horn so that yours shine.
Mine shined, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys, this is a new staple, so get used to it. We got the electronic air horn. So we're pretty pumped about it. We will not stop talking about it for the foreseeable future, so don't ask. Today,
do you think we'll ever do a podcast where we don't bring attention to the air horn?
I don't think so. I don't
know. It just doesn't feel right? It feels like we're just like ignoring someone in the room.
It is the elephant in the room if you do not discuss it, I think.
Yeah, I think it will be too. Let's see what happens next time.
Okay, we'll try our
mental note.
No promises. No promises. Today's topic is one that I think we could tell you we feel, maybe me a little more passionate than Jill about, but I just think it's important because as a group or even a facility who works with a lot of young goalkeepers who aspire to play collegiately, this is a question we get all the time. So sure you know where I'm going, but we're going to call this one, you have to go D1. Insert sarcasm.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. We have a lot of goalkeepers, a lot of aspirations to play collegiately. Sometimes from a very young age, they'll be talking about it. Sometimes not until later in their process. But obviously, the women's and the men's game are different in kind of what the standard timeline looks like. I think technically a lot of like younger women start their process earlier, whether it be going to the showcases and emailing schools, than we've kind of found that young men do. And it could just all be timeline. But as this comes up, the big question is, am I good enough to play D1? Or I only want to go D1? And I think it's a question we get a lot. And Jill, I honestly think you probably get it the most because a lot of people come to you with like their list of schools. Can you just go on, like, why do you maybe think that that's like their first snap judgment?
Well, I think everyone has incredible aspirations for their career. And I also am a proponent of that, stretching yourself and having these goals and these dreams. However, Division I isn't for everybody. And I think we really have to check in with ourselves to understand why do we want to get to that point? Like, what's the hope? What is what's the driving force to say that you played Division I or to get to Division I? Because I don't think that Division I is necessarily always going to provide the best experience for certain people. And I think that there's no harm, or I think there's no shame in saying you play Division II or Division III. And we've seen those goalkeepers even get to the next level. So for me, a lot of goalkeepers would say, and I wouldn't say this, but a lot of goalkeepers would say that the youth team that they play on is a vehicle to get them to be into a successful program in college, right? And so I think a lot of people will say, well, the ends kind of justify the means. The end is I'm getting to this, college experience, or I'm getting to this college team, or to play, at Division I level because I sacrificed so much and I was on the best youth teams, and I took the harsh lashings, the tongue lashings, and I was in an environment that maybe wasn't that great, but that was the team that was going to get me to college. But then we also make poor decisions on which college teams we're going to go to just for a potential logo on our chest, or to say that you went and you were on this team necessarily. When I think if we dive deeper, that a lot of players that are listening to this podcast would say, I want to play 3 to 4 years of college. I want an enjoyable college experience. I want to be on a competitive team where I'm contributing on a weekly basis. So if you have that desire, it's not inherently bad. I just think that a lot of people make decisions that don't really set them up for the future just to say that they play Division I soccer.
100%. And I couldn't agree more. And it kind of brings me, we got 3 points because you know us and we love points. But point number 1, there is a right school and a right fit for everybody. And I think oftentimes we can see the right school, right fit for label or looks. I think that happens a lot. And like, I can tell you, myself included, there was probably a better fit for me, but I got kind of caught up in the fact that like a school wanted to give me a scholarship. And don't get me wrong, financials are a really important part of your college decision because, especially in this economy, things are expensive.
Yeah.
You don't want to just like willy-nilly go somewhere. You have to make sure it is the right financial decision and fit. But at the end of the day, like, you have to have a school that is the right fit for you. So do I jive with the coach? Do I jive with the players? Is the system and the style something that I see myself liking? If I grew up playing and my team wasn't a kick and run type team, like we didn't just send it and run through, we were more of possession oriented, I might have a hard time going to a school that is the exact opposite. So knowing these things and learning about these schools is super important, and not just from the outside looking in, but getting an opportunity to go in the inside and kind of get a good picture of what you're stepping into, because you want to have a fit that feels right for you. And I think oftentimes what happens is we set our sights on D1 only, and you might be limiting yourself to places that might be a really, really good suit for you.
Well, Tori, what are some of those things that if I went, quote, inside and under the hood, that I would want to be looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one is, like, for me, how does the team interact with itself? So I want to catch a practice. I want to be on the sidelines. I want to see, is someone interacting with me, whether it be someone who's like not currently involved in the practice, whether they're injured or, maybe they're off, whatever the case may be. 2, what happens? What's the communication look like between players? So whether there's a mistake or something good, or just general communication in the middle of an exercise or throughout like small-sided play. And then another thing that I like to see is like, what does the coach's interventions look like? Like, we'll tell recruits, hey, watch me coach them. Make sure that that's something that you would like. Like, see the way and when we give feedback. See the way that we pull everyone together in the beginning. See the way that we close it out at the end. Like, is there touch points? Is there encouragement? Is there, a general amount of feedback that you would like? Because I think a lot of times people are like, the more feedback, the better. It's not necessarily the case, right?
Right.
So I think when you go inside, you want to see what do the connections and the relationships look like. And then also, I don't know that every school does this, but like giving yourself like the opportunity to have like a one-on-one moment with just players, so you can ask questions freely that maybe you feel like you'd like their perspective on, not their perspective when they're under the guidance of like the staff. I think it gives parents and recruits a good opportunity to kind of see and hear different things that might not feel as like scripted,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think all really good points, because I think ultimately the more information that we have, the better decision, the more informed decision that we can make. And also, I think the problem becomes when someone has an expectation and the reality doesn't meet expectation. That is when typically frustration happens, right?
For sure.
I expected to be a starter and contribute, and because you said that you valued me and whatever, and then the reality is that you're not. And so then that's when frustration can creep in. So the more information we have, the more informed decisions that we can make.
Good. Which kind of leads me to point number 2, which is your priorities should be driving your process, not the name of the school, not the level of interest they have in you. Your priorities need to drive the process. Like, let's say you coach at Loyden University and you love me. You write me all the time. It's great. I feel so wanted. I feel like, you really would prefer me to be at your school, and that when I get there, maybe I'm a star. That's great. You do want to go to a school where like they want you. Not that they're on the fence about you. They want you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you don't have my major. Maybe you're too far from home. I don't want to concede these things that are important to me just because there's a lot of love from you or because you're the most prestigious university in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to make sure that those things that are important to me are going to be there. And if I'm not quite certain, I'm new to this process, or maybe I'm new to like an athletic endeavor in college, like that's nothing that's happened in my family before, I want to make sure I get clear on that prior. I think that's such a great place to start. And I know in the past, Maria has done like college recruiting workshops through TKI. And I think one of the most amazing things is that she gets those young goalkeepers to create a list of like, well, what's important to me? What's important to me right now? What might be important to me in the future? And a list of like, I don't know, probably close to 100 schools that could provide that for you.
Right.
Because you do have to start big and then go small. You don't want to start with who just wants you or the names you think might be big and cool to go to. Those schools are great. Every school, anytime you get an opportunity to play for a college is impressive, in my opinion. But you want those priorities to drive your process because it's going to give you a really good idea of like, what does this fit look like for me besides just on the field?
Well, I also think like that makes it more important to have experiences with some of these schools before, where you might go to, let's just say you were at some kind of showcase in North Carolina. Great. You're going to go visit, Wake, you're going to see UNC, Duke. You could visit some of these schools and campuses because you don't necessarily know what you want until you maybe know what you don't want. Right. Where that was something that was like, eye-opening for me. It was like when I went to Rutgers, it was such a big campus and I didn't realize that I didn't want that until I was on that campus and realized like, wow, this is really difficult to get around. It's so big, like public transportation. I don't really feel like I want to do that. I want to go to like maybe a smaller, more intimate school. And it wasn't until it's like dating, right? Like you don't know what you are interested in until you figure out like, I definitely don't want that. Right. So I think the more we can, experience, I'm not even saying like the soccer teams, just like some general, campuses or understanding like, do I really want to go far from home? Like understanding yourself and that your needs, and not really making any kind of concessions for your ultimate like non-negotiable type things.
Right. And I think that goes, there are Division I schools that are small like that, right? Villanova is smaller than Rutgers, both Division I schools, both in great conferences, both competitive programs, right? But you're going to get a much different feel at one than you are the other. And then you might go to a D2 or a D3 school that is closer in size to Rutgers than you do, closer in size to Villanova. So you can get both those things at all these different levels. But something that is also important to consider is like, what's your priority too? You're going to school for your academics as well and to prepare yourself for maybe what you want in your career or your next steps in life. So you want to make sure that the commitment that you're going to have gives you the time to do the other things that are important as well. And I think I'm going to talk about her because I think she'd be okay with it, but Kat Eimer, who has been a long time TKI goalkeeper, and I think someone that looked into a lot of things in her process. She knew she wanted to play college soccer, but she also knew that her academics were extremely important to her. And she wants to be an engineer, and she wanted to go somewhere and did not want to concede that it was a top engineering program.
Right.
Found the fit for her. And I think that's so important to know is like, okay, well, what level do I want soccer to play? Soccer can still be important and you still devote your all to it, but at the different levels, you're going to have different time commitments as well, just based on like compliance rules.
Right.
So there might be a little less like required hours at the D3 level that allow her to do all the things she wants to do for engineering. She's in like 40 different clubs for engineering, as well as top in her major. And maybe doing that at a great engineering school that was Division II or Division I wouldn't have given her that same opportunity to be in the 45 clubs and devote all that time to her academics. So I just think it's these things that we have to consider. And a side note is that it's hard to consider these when you're 15, 16, 17 years old. You can't really always imagine what that part of your future would look like. But the more you can listen to people that have been through this process or, are part of this process on the daily, like myself, who's a college coach, like you get a better feel for what your next steps can be or considerations that you can make throughout your journey.
Totally agree.
And this last one, Jill, this is my favorite, and I think this one's important. And if you've made it all this way here and you have a younger goalkeeper, I really hope that you kind of take this home and hear it too. Is like, I often think, besides just the name and the aesthetic of going D1, this is something that people really like set their mind of. Like, I have to go D1, I have to go D2 because there's money. I'm gonna be real with you. Not every school that is D1 or D2 is gonna have full rides for everyone. Like,
Right.
the monetary piece, I think, is one of the most understood pieces about scholarship. And all that to also say that there's other ways to get scholarship. You can get scholarship academically. You can get scholarship off like optional essays and optional different things through like maybe your parent or guardian's company. There's a lot of ways to get scholarships besides just sports.
Mm-hmm.
And to bring it back to my initial point, there's not as much scholarship in sports as you think. Yes, those Power 4 schools have a lot more scholarships. They have a lot more funding. But another thing that's important to consider is, what does your school's like basketball or football look like? Because if you have basketball or football, those are the money revenue sports. So there might be a little bit more to distribute throughout the athletic department. If your school doesn't have that, that might not be the case. Could be, but it doesn't have to be. Right. So all that to say, like, it shouldn't be a means to end of like, okay, we're paying all this or we're playing on these both best youth sports teams right now because it's going to pay off when I don't have to pay for college. Because even if your kid goes D1 or D2, there's a good chance that they're not getting a full ride.
Right.
They're going to get a good amount covered, potentially. But there's also kids that play on those teams that get maybe 20% covered athletically and the rest is academic, or they get a $10,000 scholarship and then whatever they're getting academic. So it's so important to recognize that the financial piece can't be the number one. It needs to be important, but I mean the financial piece of like a school giving you money to play sport can't be important.
Yeah, I mean,
not look what you think it looks like.
Yeah, I think this is important, and we haven't even talked about the JUCO route as well. Like, my brother went to JUCO for 2 years, and then he had some kind of like in-state program that then paid for his next 2 years, which ultimately set him up for greater amounts of success when he was done playing or done college, because he didn't have to go into like massive amounts of debt to go to school. And I think that that's something that we have to put at the forefront of our brains is like, am I paying whatever it is, 60,000 a year just to like play soccer at this one school that I think is going to make me super happy, but actually might not make me that happy?
Yep.
And maybe some people have the means to do that and it's not that big of a deal, but it's just something that we should consider before making such a large investment into, well, I could be going to school for half the cost at maybe a school that I didn't think was like as big time, but it's going to set me up for success more in my future. And actually, I think sometimes too is like a school, you can see their investment in you by maybe the number of dollars that they offer you, right? Whereas like if you go to this like is it Power 4 or Power 5? Power 4 now?
I've been calling it Power 4.
Yeah, Power 4. If you go to one of those and they're like, well, we really don't have any money for you. Well, it's kind of the writing on the wall. If you're like, I want to play 3 to 4 years, then maybe the chances of that happening wouldn't be as highly likely as you might expect it to be. So I think it's a good indicator of people's investment or value or your worth is like how much money they're also willing to give you on a scholarship if you're going to go Division 1.
Absolutely. So I just think that it's important to consider. And side note for parents, like, youth sports can be so expensive. And I think sometimes we are like, okay, well, in the end, it'll work out because I won't have to pay for college for my kid, right? But that's just not necessarily the case. Like, you really don't know. Your kid could be one of the top kids in their class, and there's a chance that they don't get that quote unquote full ride academic or athletically. And you also have to consider this. Some schools can combine merit and athletic and give out better packages. Some schools can't. Some schools can't. And there's just so many different routes, and you need to make it financially appropriate for you. I know that. I'm not taking that away at all. But just because you go D1 doesn't mean that it is going to be financially appropriate. Or D2, same thing. They can give scholarships as well. D3 might end up being cheaper because you might get in-state tuition and academic aid that results in a package that's better than the just athletic you were going to get or the merit athletic you were going to get at the D1, D2 level. And not to mention, this is a bonus fourth point, but anytime you can play a collegiate sport, it's impressive to me because not everyone gets to do that and not everyone can make it. And I do think that, no matter if it was D1, D2, D3, JUCO, NAIA, if you're playing the sport you love at the next level, that's impressive. Mm-hmm. And the name or the accolades, none of that should matter because the reason you should be doing it, the reason to do it is for your enjoyment and fulfillment.
Right. I always say that to people. I'm like, all right, make a list of all the pros and cons, cover up the names of the schools, and pick the one that suits you best. Because ultimately that I think is going to be more valuable than going somewhere where you're like, well, I'm at X such and such school and that logo is supposed to make me happy. But ultimately, I don't ever think that it's going to fulfill you.
That'll preach. That's all I got on the topic, but I do have a question. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Okay. I want to know an item in your life that brings you comfort.
Oh my gosh, this is so silly. There is a blanket that I have, and it's called Aunt Kathy.
Aunt Kathy!
Yeah, Aunt Kathy.
Yeah.
And it's like a quilted blanket that one of Maria's friends gave her, or she commandeered. I'm not really sure. But I sleep with it every night. And like yesterday, I wasn't feeling well, and I was in bed, and I just was laying with Aunt Kathy, and I ultimately am here today. I feel better, but I attribute all that back to her.
Thanks, Aunt Kathy. You rock.
How about you? What's your comfort item? Vitamins? Supplements?
I love supplements, but no, my comfort item is my new house shoes, my slippers. And I feel ancient.
I was going to say, you look 80 years old in those slips.
I know, but they're so good. Like, I just love them. They make me so happy when I put them on my feet when I get home from work.
Well, that's like an item too, is like it will wear out eventually. Like I think Aunt Kathy's good. Like the more it wears out, the better it is. But like, are you going to buy like 3 to 4 pair before they they change it? Like that company
they're $10
changes?
on Amazon, honey. I don't
okay.
own anywhere.
Okay.
And I'm not getting paid.
You might want to think about that.
Maybe they'll give me a sponsorship on my house shoes.
Oh my gosh. Wait, do you not wear shoes in the house?
No.
Right. It just brings in too many germs.
Yeah, I was raised as a shoes off at the door.
Okay.
Type kid. Okay. And that rule has like been ingrained in my memory. Like when I come to your house, I take my shoes off immediately.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever noticed that.
Yeah, my shoes are never on in your house.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I think I got to start doing that and leave my shoes outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just put them right by the door.
Right. You just like traipse in a bunch of like germs and dirt and who knows where my children's feet have been or hands really.
I get it. You can't help with it. Well, I do wipe my dog's paws off. I'm not going to lie to you when they come back in. But that's because I have OCD.
Yeah, you wipe your dogs off?
Yeah, I wipe my dog's paws off. I
don't
wipe my dog's off. My dog's paws.
Okay, we've gone too far at the end of this podcast.
Have. All right, we're out of here. You guys, catch you later.
Catch you later.